Humanity is fucking awful.
So I'm sporting a Schlitz today.
Oh, nice. I have Johnny Walker Black Label. I know I mentioned it to Dave already, but since we're officially doing it now, and I'm going to. I think this is becoming my review glass. I've got my Spies Demise glass full of gin and tonic.
Nice.
Got my Blade Runner 2049 whiskey glass.
Nice.
My screen accurate Johnny Walker whiskey.
I
don't know if I can drink this without cutting it with something else because it's pretty strong, but I'm gonna try.
Hey, just be careful. That stuff sneaks up on you. 1 minute you're like, everything's fine. The next minute you're like, why can't I talk properly anymore?
Oh boy.
Yeah. Dan gets that with beer.
I'm Dan Carlson, 1/4 of the Lost Blokes. I am not a replicant, as far as I know.
I'm John Kadolf. I am 1/4 of the Lost Blokes. And let me tell you about my mother.
I am Dave Nesbitt, another percentage of the Lost Blokes. My percentage varies depending upon how much I've been drinking or how well I've done on the Voight-Kampff test. So I'm reasonably certain that I am not a replicant, but then they might not have told me either.
All your memories may have been implanted.
In which case, I want to have a word with the writer because that guy's an asshole.
Dave, you chose Blade Runner.
I chose Blade Runner.
And our 8 for 80s series.
Yep. Long story short, Blade Runner is a kind of a loose adaptation of a Philip K. Dick story called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? The notion of this entire world is that at a certain point in time, the Tyrell Corporation started making beings that were remarkably human, but were stronger and faster and every bit as smart, if not more so than us. And basically they wound up becoming, as we are with, everything we do with human beings, slave labor that are used for combat or pleasure or this or that. After a mutiny that took place on Earth, they were basically banned from the planet and they're now in the outward colonies. And anytime that a replicant sneaks out and comes back to Earth, there is a special section of the police department called Blade Runners who hunt down and execute, although in this case the term is retirement, replicants. So the main character, Deckard, is played by Harrison Ford, and he is a former Blade Runner who is brought back to hunt down 4 remarkably dangerous replicants who have been turned loose on Earth and are now trying to find a way to that's the other key part of the replicants. They have a limited lifespan, 4 years.
Which is the reason they've returned to Earth.
Yeah, they're trying to extend out their life. He has X amount of time to be able to catch up to them while they're trying to figure out, they have X amount of time to live or to try to figure out how they can live longer. And that's basically the overall plot of the film right there. The long story short of this is that it's a great examination of what it means to be human, what it means to have a soul, what the context of that is. And it does a remarkably good job of that. Another element that we'll probably go into is the background of the city and the way that the whole place is designed, because the guy who basically started the cyberpunk movement, William Gibson, said that he saw Blade Runner and had to go back and rewrite the first third of his novel, Neuromancer, because he was like, everybody's going to think I'm ripping off Blade Runner.
Well, there's like several landmarks in science fiction cinema. First is King Kong in 1933. Yeah. The next one is probably 2001 in 1968. Then Star Wars in 1977 with the introduction of the used future. And then Blade Runner, which has pretty much dominated the look of sci-fi since.
Well, yeah. you forgot Fifth Element. But
oh, of course, yes. Hey, great movie, but you're still not going to tell me that it's the most influential.
It's a landmark. In fact,
Okay.
you can see that
Wow.
you can see that Blade Runner had a really serious influence on
Blade Runner did have an influence
on Fifth Element as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, another influence that Blade Runner had is in the new Picard series. I want to note that the idea of replicants being banned because of an insurrection and then hunted down and destroyed is one of the major themes in the new Picard series. Hi, Kat.
Kat has joined us.
Hello.
Hi, Kat. Would you like to
That
introduce
is a
yourself?
great
for
look, by the
show?
way.
Yes, I was going to
Thank you. Yes, I will introduce myself and then get ready for me to be like hella mad at everything.
Okay.
Oh God.
I am the Mad Hat Cat. Are we now saying Lost Blokes?
Yes, we are.
All right. I am 25% of the Lost Blokes. I feel new and vibrant somehow. And yet also distant, mysterious.
Just like this channel.
the mysterious quarter of the Lost Blokes.
Yes.
Maybe that's my expertise. Mystery.
I'm just going to change my name to Eyebrows because I can't get mine under control.
Trust me, I feel your pain.
Change your name to Spock.
Yeah, just that one over there. It happens. It happens.
It's been a theme for Dan for about 8 years now.
No, but 1 year.
Yeah. You're not going to shave your eyebrows anymore, are you?
I didn't. I tried to trim it with scissors, and it didn't work. And now I'm still coping with the aftermath. Okay. Anyway,
these things do happen.
Dave, stop tonguing it.
It sounded like you mostly got through your synopsis.
Yes.
Luckily, this is one of those movies that like you can pretty much give the basic plot line and you don't need to say too much else because you kind of know how this is all going to shake out by the end of it. It doesn't make it any less enjoyable to watch, but like, I don't know, it all just seems so predestined, so preordained.
I think looking back at it, it may seem predestined and preordained, but
maybe that's why.
At the time, it was pretty revolutionary because you're set up for a mystery. You're also set up by the casting of Harrison Ford to view him as a hero and to expect an action movie. And instead,
that's not what that is.
Yeah, and instead,
he's a crooked cop.
Instead, what you get is a crooked cop who realizes he's in the wrong.
Yeah.
In the course of the movie, and audiences probably weren't prepared for that.
Well, that's the thing that I like about it is that sitting down and explaining the plot doesn't take that long. Yeah. The undertones and such, though, keep bringing you back to watch this damn film over and over again because watching Deckard
so much.
Yeah, watching his character grow a bit more into this realization that, you know, what he does.
Uh-oh.
Well, no, we lost him. What does he do? What does Deckard do?
He's a replicant. He froze for a second there.
Oh, yes.
But yeah,
just failed the Voight-Kampff test there, buddy.
Oh God, now they're all going to be coming for me.
Yeah, all these close-ups on the eyes, and the focusing on eyes is like the way to catch replicants or distinguish them between them and real humans. No, that doesn't matter. It's if your internet freezes.
Well,
yeah.
It's like it's an electromagnetic thing.
Yeah.
If you're walking
if
and suddenly your
internet is
motion
always
turns twitchy.
freezing, definitely replicant.
Yeah.
Well, the thing about the empathy test is that it's testing to see if people have emotional responses. It's being administered by people who are working for a system with no empathy, and all of the replicants seem to be expressing empathy in some form or another throughout the movie. I
was going to say the ones that we.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, Dan 6378. You're in a kitchen. Your mother started water boiling an hour and a half ago. It's still boiling, and it's now down to the bottom of the pan.
What do you mean? Why would I do that?
My mother.
Why aren't I helping my mother in the kitchen? I'm a good boy.
Kat was saying something. What were you saying?
Sorry.
No, I love the whole Voight-Kampff test. In that I hate it. Like it seems cruel.
Yes.
But I understand the technique of it. But like you said, Dan, all four of the Nexus 6 replicants seem to be experiencing empathy, or at least like flashes of their own emotion. And I was kind of trying to watch for it this time. I remembered the little red glint in the pupils from watching it before, but I tried to see if there was kind of any pattern to when that little flash happened. And I couldn't quite tell if it was like, okay, I am supposed to be experiencing empathy. Turn on putting myself in other people's shoes.exe and processing through, all right, how am I supposed to react?
Well, the novel of Philip K. Dick, the replicants were never supposed to be in any way something you're supposed to look upon with anything but disdain. It was something you're supposed to avoid becoming. And the movie turns that on its head.
This is why I know I'm a fucking villain, is because I hate everyone in this movie except the replicants.
Yes. Yeah. Well, me too.
Humanity is fucking awful. Yes. And they treat the replicants as so disposable. It was like, I'm sorry, they didn't ask to be endowed with sentience. And then you're like, yeah, no, that's okay though. You'll get used to it. The light that burns half as long burns twice as bright. Enjoy what you've got. Be happy with your place in life. By the way, y'all were clearly having some frustrations and some anger and some fear with capitalism in the 80s, but instead of like doing something about it, it seems like you just doubled down. Like, nope, this is the only way things could ever be, and I don't know any better, and what can I do? You're like a fucking abuse victim, American society. This is why there are all of these like dystopian, pan-Asian clash with Western culture. Well, and I wonder, like, that line, like, I don't mean this disparagingly, just in an observational kind of way. That seems like a line that, oh God, what's Jack Nicholson's name in the romantic comedy where he's a writer and a total asshole to the waitress?
I don't know.
As Good as It Gets?
Yeah, As Good as It Gets. So that line right there, are you trying to test to see if I'm a replicant or a lesbian? That seems like the kind of line that Jack Nicholson in As Good as It Gets would write. He's like, I think of a woman, and then I take away all of these things that make a man awesome.
And then I take away reason and responsibility.
Yeah. And then I
reason and accountability. Like, reason and accountability.
It seems like, what would a woman say to this? This is probably it. Type.
Yeah. Sorry, I am testing for replicants.
Yes, that comes with it. That's awesome. Hey, I don't know if you got to see this because I put it up before you were on, but look what I got.
Oh my God, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Wait.
How did Dan acquire this?
I got it from John.
Keep talking.
Yes.
I love how wonderfully nerdy we get about our respective bits and pieces of film memorabilia.
Yeah.
Yes.
In fact, they chose this background because that looks like a billboard.
Yeah. Thinking about the idea that they have a limited lifespan, though, part of me is wondering how much of that is basically a thing that they built in, because if the replicants live long enough, they develop not just sentience, but actual emotions of their own. And now you have to own up to the fact that you're indulging in slavery.
Yeah, okay. So the way that the doctor explains it to Roy, he says that they had to do it that way because that's the best way that they could have done it. He's lying flat out to him, in that. I mean, he's coming up with all kinds of excuses of why it can't be reversed. Yes, but not the fact that they did that on purpose because they knew that they would develop emotional sentience.
Because his fear was that this exact moment would happen.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, the whole thing, it seems like it's capitalism's, I think in this future, every person on the books anyway, has been given equality, and the last group that they can exploit and people will still be okay with it are these quote unquote artificial people who are actually just like people in every respect other than the fact that they weren't born.
Right.
And,
Well, and in most cases, without emotional response or without
because
emotions.
they're 4 years old, they don't have a lot of developmental time for that.
I don't know if that's why. I think that they, I think that what happens with is that they purposely didn't build them with emotion because they wanted them to be a workforce. Which, if you build robots and they're not necessarily sentient and they have no emotion, and you want to use them as a workforce, fine. But if you build AI that can develop sentience and emotion, then you have a then you have a new
responsibility
race
to treat it with
yeah, exactly, with the same dignity as any other living creature, like Data from Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Okay,
Dave, you
Kat,
see all my facial expressions
Kat's
here, right?
really
Dave?
enthused about something, so I want to see.
No. Like everything you're saying, I'm like, yeah. Yes, that's what the capitalist overlords want to do. They want to remove all sense of emotion from me. I'm sorry. I'm really stuck on this idea now.
No, I agree.
Well, it is a
I
major
think-
theme of the movie, so that's.
I think that the
it's just,
capitalist
like,
overlords
so fucking blatant, and like if you remove the nouns and replace them with like our actual societal terms rather than distant dystopian future, even though I mean this all happened last year, right?
Well,
This all happened last year.
It's all in the future, but it's done with a 40s aesthetic, so it's supposed to be kind of timeless. You're supposed to.
Yeah. No, I probably saw Dark City before I saw Blade Runner. So I kind of wonder if Jennifer Connelly's aesthetic in that movie was inspired by Blade Runner a little bit. So I didn't quite catch this. Do they implant false memories in all replicants, or was that just
no?
Rachel
was
the
beta. Rachel was the beta test of that.
Okay.
Was it?
And well,
I was gonna say, how the fuck did Deckard know about it?
Well, Deckard may have actually been the beta.
I was gonna say because I don't think he was. I don't think Chris was the first.
Do they actually? I can't remember from the more recent Blade Runner movie that came out a few years ago. Did Deckard actually turn out to be a replicant?
The question is left hanging in the air intentionally.
Okay.
Which is what this movie does, and I think that's wise.
So there is a moment when Rachel is in his apartment. He keeps trying to offer her a drink, and there is a moment where Rachel, he fucking knows I'm a replicant. I know now, and he knows, and he's a Blade Runner. And she says, "What if I go north? Would you hunt me down? Would you chase me? Would you kill me?" And he says, "No, I wouldn't." And then he's out of focus, but I swear that you can see that little red glint in his eyes.
I thought so too.
Although I'd say that,
but it's there.
We were talking about that before everybody started.
Or anything, but
the way that effect was achieved was that there were the cameraman was shining a light directly from the camera and it would reflect back off into the camera. So it's quite possible that Harrison Ford just crossed the line at that point. It wasn't supposed to have that happen, but it does add to everybody's stuff.
I think that sitting around, and part of the depth of this film is that so much of it is left basically for the viewer to decide. Especially the question is, Deckard a replicant? There was, I was watching a thing on Things That You Missed, and they actually said, for about 8 frames, you see Harrison Ford's eyes flash. And to me, I think that is either it's a mistake or it's something that in post they went, and it's just out of focus enough. But I think that also speaks to the character of Deckard, who is completely unaware. He might have been one of the first ones to get his false memories implanted. Or it could just be that at this point in time, his own sense of empathy has him feeling more like one of the replicants, even if he isn't one. he kind of exists in their world now.
I think it has to be a question for the audience, because it's the test of the audience to see if they can still extend empathy to Deckard, whether he is a replicant or not. So it doesn't matter at that point.
Because I empathize with all of them.
I empathize with everybody in the movie except for the
Oh no, I meant
detective
I empathize with all the replicants, so clearly I'm
Yeah.
a replicant.
Well, no.
You caught me, John.
Like I said, the replicants were exhibiting empathy, and the people who were sending. It's actually about the. I think it's more about the evil of the system that sets these people against each other than it is about the, is this person real? Is this person, like it's more, and that's the moment when. The love scene that's always controversial between Deckard, I'll call it euphemistically a love scene. It is controversial, but I think
necessarily label that particular.
No, it's a terrible moment, but it has to be a terrible moment because he still views replicants as an object. And
that is a good reason to use that as a dynamic. Like, if that's how you all take it, rather than like, ooh, yeah, make her want it kind of.
Yeah.
Kind of attitude,
which a lot of the people who've seen it,
if that's or forget the intent, if that's the effect, I don't love it. But if it's, as you say, to more fully illustrate that, even though he's having like empathetic feelings toward her, like, I feel sad for you that you're a replicant, and like you're clearly sad about it, even if you don't really feel it, but yet he's still using her like an object.
So, okay. So I tried to look at it from a number of different angles, that scene. And, it's clearly disturbing at the beginning. It's one of those tropes that you see in films of that era, where somebody resists at first, and then it's kind of like one of those like you really do want it, don't you, kind of things, where of course now we call that something else, but
there's so much coercion in this film. Not just sexual and romantic coercion, but just like they coerce Deckard at the very beginning of the movie.
Yeah, he doesn't want to do anything.
To come with the detective whose name escapes me, who makes the little origami. And then
Edward James Olmos.
Gaff.
Captain.
Yeah.
They treat Deckard like an object, to be perfectly frank.
What do you?
Well, I think that's one of, we're talking earlier about capitalist themes in there, and that's one of the great elements in there that I just kind of hit me in my head, is the idea that you have these incredibly powerful, capitalist overlords, Mr. Tyrell, et cetera, who are making all of these beings and then putting them in conflict with each other, so that way they don't notice the fact of the great imbalance of power that everybody's taking part in.
Yeah, he's surrounded by luxury. Does he live in like an old museum or something? Because there's just stone and polished marble and like carved edifices everywhere. He's also one of the oldest characters you see. Like, apart from a lot of the street vendors down in Chinatown and all the other Pan-Asian towns in the city, Tyrell is probably one of the oldest characters in the movie. And while he's lavishly draped in his, Egyptian cotton robe, telling Roy, like, be happy with the life that you have. Enjoy it. Like, fuck you. When you go on living for, 30, 40, 50 more years with the aid of the technology that I probably made possible. Fuck you, Dad. Fuck you, Dad. Get out of my room.
I noticed that even the replicant who's portrayed as very simple-minded, like the first guy that's given the test, he's an engineer. So even he is quite more intelligent than probably the average Joe. And the movie portrays him as the dumber of the four of them. So how smart is
how smart is Roy?
Daddy, Jesus.
Yeah.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
It's that whole last scene of that was another thing that just came to mind in that context for me. That whole last scene where Roy is chasing after Deckard and enjoying the moment
Oh, no, we
Come on.
lost.
Replicant.
time with this. It's the did it happen again?
We lost you again.
Yes.
Sorry.
The whole last scene you were saying.
The whole last scene with Roy chasing after Deckard and being the hunter rather than the hunted, you can just see his sheer enjoyment of being on the other end for a while. But
Oh,
then
yeah.
at the end, it begins to the thing that I like about the ending. In the original version, they explain it in the voiceover. But to me, I think that it's more interesting for me for him to have a realization of we're both on the wrong end of this particular game, and there is no reason for me to take that out on you
Yeah.
for being a tool of that at this point.
Mhm.
And I think that was another great message that kind of came along with it, that the notion of in that last moment, he realized that all life has a genuine value.
Yeah.
He becomes kind of like the Buddhist monks who sit in their cells and won't allow themselves to leave because they're afraid of harming a blade of grass when they walk. It's that moment of like
Wait, he
complete and
goes to
utter.
the roof. If he walks on the ground, he's going to
Yeah.
trample all over that grass.
Well, that Tears in Rain speech was written by Rutger Hauer.
No shit.
It's like the best fucking
That's
speech on film in the last
really
40
cool.
years, written by the
I
actor.
really like Rutger.
Yeah, he was good.
He's a scary motherfucker.
I
No,
love.
he-
I just love the
I
fact.
didn't
very
find him
striking,
scary.
very intense.
I found him intense.
Well, I have to ask.
Is he a poet?
David 57835.
Yeah.
You're at a rave party, and you pick up a blotter of acid off the table in front of you, and as you raise it to your face, you realize it's just a squashed bug on a piece of a napkin.
But it could be a really interesting bug, so I eat it anyway.
You could get a trip off of a bug because a lot of them have toxins that would.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
They're
interesting.
just questions. They're just questions.
I think these questions are okay.
It's funny that you bring up insects, John. Jay made a really cool comment about the scene where Pris dies, getting shot repeatedly in the belly. But like she's on her back and like her limbs are flailing all over the place and she's screeching, and the reverberation in these tall empty halls. He said it's reminiscent of an injured insect, like just doing whatever it can to try and get out of the situation. I'm like, oh,
Dan and I talked. Yeah, Dan and I talked about that one time. I think I many years ago. I think we were watching it on the phone together, or you know what I mean. We were on the phone while watching it or something. And I asked you, why is she freaking out like that? And you were like, well, she is pissed off that she's dying.
Well, also, there's that.
It has a little bit of temper tantrum vibe to it.
Yeah, but also part of it is just if you've ever been in a massive amount of pain, your body is trying to find any spot where it can be comfortable. And
she was looking.
Yeah.
Did not find it though.
It's
hard to find a comfortable position to lay down when there's lead in your belly.
Yeah.
All she wanted to do was live.
I liked how uncomfortable you could tell Deckard was immediately after he shot that first replicant in the back.
Yeah.
So going in that this is not so he's doing this because if he ain't doing it, he's going to be on the receiving end of it.
Yeah. If he's not police, he's little people.
Yeah. So,
God,
it's the only power that he has in the world.
Oh, that line really like struck me right in the face. I had forgotten. I don't know how I could, because it's kind of iconic and really like often associated with the movie. But that first replicant crashing through all those
planes of glass,
just again and again and again, because one shot's not enough, two shots not enough, and just like the spatter against that clear raincoat. I can't believe I didn't remember that scene immediately, because it's It's very
Well,
intense.
and this is marketed as an action movie, and right after Raiders of the Lost Ark with Harrison Ford in it, and people go to see it, and they probably feel like they're being slapped in the face with whoa,
Yeah.
because we're supposed to we're not supposed to cheer when the girl gets shot in the back. We're supposed to this guy's not such a good guy.
Yeah, all the panes of glass though. It's like why does everybody just run into shit? Like, okay, Pris, when she first is kind of baiting,
Pissed off that they're dying, John. Come on.
Yeah.
It also shows an emotional element because she's in a full-blown panic at that point.
Yeah. Well, okay. So when JF Sebastian comes along and Pris is first laying in the trash to bait him, and she gets up and just runs straight into the vehicle. It's like, it's right there. You can see the vehicle.
She did that on purpose.
Got up and ran.
I was going to say that
broke
was
the window.
She was clearly.
I mean, she just set the scene 2 seconds before he showed up by covering up.
Yeah.
I'm so scared and alone and helpless. Oh me, oh my.
Although apparently there's a piece of
baby bird.
There's a piece of physical business that happened in there that wasn't supposed to happen because her arm crashed into the window. And Daryl Hannah legitimately cut the fuck out of her arm.
Oh shit!
Ooh.
Yeah.
Not great for
so
someone
that wasn't supposed to happen.
Doing their own gymnastic stunts.
So I was going to say, JF Sebastian probably knew at that point that she was a replicant because a regular human crashing into a window, running into a window of a car, is not going to smash it apart.
And you have to assume that by this standard of 2020, windshields and side windows were stronger.
Yeah.
Or would be stronger than they would be imagined in 1982.
It does get a lot of things right in 1982. I mean, there's that whole scene. I've seen people complain about it, but I find it fascinating where he's just sitting in his apartment, digging into that photograph more on his little view screen. Go left, go right. I mean, we can kind of do that with the internet a little bit now, and
a lot less tedious sounding.
Yeah,
maybe it's just because we're used to it.
I don't know. I probably because of the atmosphere. I just so this is one of those movies where you wouldn't want the future to look like this at all, but a part of me wants to live in it because I just love the way it looks.
There's a part of me that
it has a really cool aesthetic to it.
Yeah, I would love to to live in that particular night shift again and again and again. It just looks amazing and really, it has a sort of Fantasyland vibe to it. It really set the tone for what would eventually become the overall like cyberpunk aesthetic. There's no such thing as sun. It's constantly raining.
It's just smog. There is no sky. There is smog.
Well,
the only art that you see is advertisements.
High or low you are above it.
Except in the theatrical cut where there's a sunny day at the end from The Shining.
Yep.
There's 5 cuts of the movie. You actually have the box set, so you can check it out if you'd like.
I would actually like to go through all the rest of them just to see the little differences because I don't remember the voiceover over. That was another comment that Jay made. Like, see, this is why the final cut is so much better because there's no voiceover and you can actually be more immersed in this world because there is so much going on visually, and audibly too, that throwing in a voiceover there, like, okay, noir detective, we get it.
Yeah, in the 80s, I think it was.
Don't tell.
There's a lot of pushback from the studio when they saw the
I don't think that I have to actually watch the video that Dan posted of. I've read the notes, but I need to watch the video of Harrison Ford reading the editing notes. And I honestly don't think that especially with the initial theatrical release, that the studio actually trusted the audience to be able to understand or to get into what was going on without an explanation. And and also like I was telling Dan when we first got started, when I first saw it, I was a very early teenager, and I didn't have the emotional, maturity at that point in time to understand everything that was going on. So that voiceover was actually really helpful to me in terms of understanding what was going on.
Fair enough.
I think for me as well, the first time I saw it, I would have to say as well. But I'm glad every other time I've seen it, it wasn't there.
I'm just amused now that I'm going back and because so much of my family is living in Quebec now. I've been relearning my French, and so sitting there and listening to Edward James Olmos's patois of various languages, and I'm now beginning to understand part of what he's saying. The combination of French, Japanese, and Spanish that's going on.
Blade Runner 2049, the screenwriter was the same guy as this movie, and he said Blade Runner 2049, he charted it as a journey of a guy who's a manual who becomes a poem. So he does everything by the book at the beginning, and he becomes a deeper person by the end, and I think that actually charts with Harrison Ford in this movie.
Yeah.
That is an excellent way of putting it. Are you sure Rutger didn't write that too?
Oh, that sounds like a Rutger thing.
Yeah.
Rutger should have, just for that speech alone, even though it's 30 seconds, he should get a co-writing credit.
Yeah, but it's
I was
because
gonna
over
say,
30 seconds.
did he get any kind of credit for that originally?
I don't think so. I
Does
mean,
he get any credit for it now?
They acknowledge that he did it, but they don't
Okay.
I don't think he got paid for it. But.
I also know that for I know it's kind of more action than sci-fi, but it is still a sci-fi movie. The special effects in this are like incredibly subdued. Like it really just boils down to like that practical effect with the light being shined over the camera and into the subject's eyes. And then having super strength, throw
a lot of beautiful matte painting backgrounds, and I mean, just the beginning of the movie, enchants you.
That Vangelis score doesn't hurt.
Oh God!
Oh yeah.
I was going to ask. I noticed the single name composer, and I didn't have time to go and look into them, but do they do other stuff?
Yes, Chariots of Fire, albums that are not soundtracks he's done. I actually have a track on my unreleased album that is trying to imitate him.
I was sitting down because I was listening to a thing on the history of synth pop, and they mentioned Giorgio Moroder, Vangelis, and Jean-Michel Jarre. I'm making up a playlist of all three of them. Just because it's such remarkably, well put together electronic music.
Yeah.
I can and have fallen asleep to this soundtrack.
There's actually, to me, it's as good as a Pink Floyd album. I just think it's amazing.
There was actually something I stumbled into last night that made me smile. Is a Blade Runner background sound.
Yes, I've fallen asleep to that. Deckard's apartment. You can hear that.
Yep. And that's something for me that I realized when I moved out into the county for a while and was living in a rural area. It was almost impossible for me to get to sleep because I was so used to city sounds that the absence of it constantly had my ears listening. Anytime something happened outside my window, I was like,
that brings me back to a thought I was having earlier. Would you say that there is kind of a fear of silence, like not necessarily with this movie, but just like maybe films of the time? I thought a little bit about that. I think a little bit about that whenever there's something where like they use voiceover and then they decide, nah, fuck it.
I'll tell you, this is the moment where that kind of rang true for me yesterday when I watched it again, is when Rachel is playing piano and the movie doesn't let her just play the piano and you hear the piano. You actually hear Vangelis' score over it.
Yeah, the score comes over it.
Yeah, so I was like, that's a little weird, but okay.
Even when Harrison
At least
Ford
it
was
harmonized.
playing the piano. Yeah. There's a stark contrast between the soothe of the soundtrack of the score and the incredibly loud environment.
Yeah.
And you have it kind of plays with your level of comfort and or anxiety, where you have this incredibly soothing soundtrack and you have this incredibly loud
Ambient
bustling
jazz.
everything, with the sounds of vehicles going by and the don't walk, proceed,
Cross now.
proceed.
Cross
Yeah.
now.
Cross now.
Move on.
All that,
Cross
just
now.
everything.
on.
There is sound coming from everywhere. And then that really etherical, angelic voice coming from that blimp that, is telling people to go off world.
And This is the only movie to use well, not the only movie, but one of the best uses of product placement as a sarcasm.
Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola.
Yeah, enjoy Coca Atari.
I'm also glad to see that Schlitz survived into this dystopian 2020.
Yes.
Schlitz, solid junk beer.
Well,
solid junk beer.
So did Johnny Walker. It's in the movie.
I couldn't remember what liquor he had, but like, I don't know, he seems like a Scotchman. Probably a cheap Scotchman. So we got some grants and my angular bottle with my angular glass.
So how many of the cuts has everybody seen? I've seen all 5, including the work.
I've probably seen 3.
I think I've seen 3.
Okay.
I've seen probably 2, maybe 3, because I know that I've watched bits and pieces of this movie on television before.
I think the only film I can think of that has more released cuts than this is Dune. In this case, though, and that's something, thinking about the silence element and being afraid of it, is in a lot of cases, you would have an issue of that being a matter of style over substance. But the fact that the way that the world is the way that it is, and just watching Deckard and everybody moving through it with no dialogue and just the sounds of the city and the Vangelis soundtrack, it's a substance in and of itself. And it tells you so much about how the world is and how the characters are in relation to the world. And I think that, sometimes you just sit there and sometimes the director will set up a long shot just for sheer entertainment value of doing a long shot with no real dialogue or anything else, but to show, hey, I can do the thing. No, here the purpose is to show we are these very, very small cogs living in a very, very large world. And, it's not one that treats us with any degree of respect.
At the end, Deckard saves Rachel in a way, but Rachel saves Deckard too.
Yeah.
If it hadn't been for Rachel, Deckard would still be plowing away at this and just die doing what he's doing. And
no, he would have died in 6 months to 3.5 years.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, depending on if they experiment.
Yeah. Well, I don't know the whole thing with him, like,
his
like
birthday
getting dragged back into the police office. I was quit before. I'm twice as quit now. Were you though, Deckard?
That's what I'm thinking. His birthday may have been the day before he was brought in that day.
We just turned him loose in the city with these brand new memories we gave him.
There's so many parallels between this movie and Dark City. Like I would really like to watch like one right after the other and then go back the other way the next day and then just kind of go back and forth. This implantation of memories, this trying to like create life, but then getting mad when it doesn't do what you want it to do.
Okay, so
before we end, I have 2 questions for you, or like perhaps to stir a thought statements. Okay. So the first one is that there are so many half-finished and kind of like barely started or maybe just like winding down replicants scattered around JF's place. It's really, really sad to see that like he calls them his friends and yet they're just kind of all over the place like junk. Yeah. And he comes across as like a little bit of a hoarder. And I have sort of like American Buffalo vibes going on. Like a little less sinister because JF is really nice. And I think, part of the reason he is so nice is because, he has, how did Chris put it? Accelerated decrepitude.
Yeah.
Even she's so whimsical, even in the face of death.
Yeah.
Well, and I do. I think there's genuine warmth between her and him too. I think they both, even though she's enacting a plan that's going to use him to get to Terrell. I think they definitely look upon him as very similar to them, and they don't.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's in all the cuts, but Batty actually apologizes to him as he's to JF as he's walking away from killing Terrell.
Yeah, no, he's
sorry. I'm sorry you had to see that kind of thing.
He does. Yeah. Oh my God.
But I don't know if he kills. Does he kill JF? Because JF's not in the elevator right afterwards.
He's not, and
I don't think he does.
Okay.
I think
I don't think they
JF
really
fled,
answer that.
and Roy was like, "There's no reason for me to go after him. My time is short anyway."
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, what do you feel about the whole like just kind of junkyard vibe of this? And the other part about it is like it's a junkyard, but you don't bother throwing anything away. You just continue to live among the filth and the junk.
There's just detritus covering everything, so no one knows where to put anything anymore. There's just junk everywhere. So
but you notice that there was not a there was not a population problem though. The thing is that so many dystopian future type of films point to 250 billion people on the planet and not enough room for everybody. Yeah. And Sebastian, when he's taking Pris up, says, "Oh, there's plenty of room for everybody."
I would assume that he's doing financially okay because he does genetic design work for the Tyrell Corporation.
Yeah.
But he's living like someone who does not have any money. I mean, he's living in an abandoned building. I mean, it's a nice, big, huge building, but it's not somewhere you'd expect. You'd expect them to kind of take care of the people who are higher up on the corporate echelon, and they aren't.
He's one of the good ones. Yeah. He's one of the good ones.
But they aren't even doing that. They aren't even doing that. They're not even taking care of the. They're not even trying to keep this idea going of trickle down, even 3 levels down to where he's at.
Yeah, he lives in this squalor building, and the guy he's playing. Yeah, he basically seems like he's squatting. Is in this, like you said, like almost like a museum. But to answer your question though, I found JF Sebastian's place lonely, creepy as fuck, and very saddening.
So what does it say about me that I agree with all of those statements, but I also kind of want to spend some time in that place?
I mean,
Dan, just buy your sex bot. You'll be happy.
I didn't think that was where he was going with it. I think he was just saying, do you appreciate the aesthetic of it?
Yeah, I was talking about the aesthetic.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm definitely a person who appreciates a very cluttered aesthetic. As long as
you'd like my place.
Like I don't know that I qualify as a hoarder. I have a really like deep fear of food being left out. Like if it's getting old in the fridge, at least it's in the fridge. It's fine. But if it's like out in the open, I can't deal with it. But I have a lot of things. I have a lot of clothes. I have a lot of movie paraphernalia. Some of it mine, some of it not. I have a lot of books. I have a lot of figurines. I have a lot of instruments. There's just and like knick-knackery just everywhere. So I'm with Dan. I really enjoy the aesthetic of JF's place. And like you said, it strikes me as lonely and kind of like just giving up.
Yeah.
Not just because he is experiencing the accelerated decrepitude, but also just because like he has this job doing these amazing things, like scientifically speaking, making leaps and bounds. Like it's just impossible. And yet he lives like this and nothing has ever really changed.
And he's
I'm sorry, go ahead, Dan. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I just want to add that he's kind of sweet, but at the same time, he does view them as inventions. He asks them, show me something, He's not, not relating to them as a person.
No, that's another thing that kind of gets me
but
about
he idolizes them.
He does. He and Tyrell both, like at one point, say you're both so perfect. And kind of marveling at this height of perfection, and that almost makes their objectification of them even more cruel, because
it's almost like worship.
they are giving them all of these heightened strengths and abilities, sometimes literal bodily strength, and like in Leon's case, he's an engineer. But then they're like, no, you don't get to use any of that for your own self. We get to utilize those strengths that we gave you until we're done with you.
Yeah.
And then, but they always refer to all of the replicants, except for maybe one case that I can remember Deckard doing. He refers to Rachel as it. And then every other time in the movie, before and after that sequence where he had done the Voight-Kampff thing with Rachel, they always use people pronouns. They use she and her to talk about them. So they talk about them like they're people. They treat them like they're people. They react to emotional states of them like people, and yet they're not people to them.
Yeah.
I think that's also something that, thinking about JF, but also there, it kind of hit me. There's two different elements here, so work with me on this. JF strikes me as being somebody who is, because of his advanced decrepitude, has probably never had the opportunity to, or at least, he's never really had a chance to grow past a certain emotional state.
Mm-hmm.
And so it seems like he's stuck in this kind of persistent childhood where, if you remember your childhood, you, on the one hand, were the person who sat there and cried over your kittens, but would also sit there and have a great time setting ants on fire with a
magnifying glass.
Oh my God, that's so sad.
And to me, I think that he's in that.
That's why he and Pris have such a good dynamic. Sorry, continue.
And they are both, and I think that they are both in that space where they're kind of both feeling an emotional state that neither one of them were very familiar with.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes JF and Pris such great characters and such a great dynamic. I would happily love to see that part of that story expanded on.
Yeah.
Doesn't need any action, doesn't need any adventure. I just want to see these two growing into being more human as a result of the other one.
Yeah.
And then the other thought was something that I saw in a meme on Facebook, but it really does apply to this film, talking about how we always have the science fiction film where we have created artificial life, but we treat it horribly and, we enslave it and this and that, and going, look, one thing the internet has taught me is that over the last 20 years is that we will anthropomorphize anything. This is my Roomba. His name is Teddy, and I will fight to the death to keep him alive if you mess with him.
Yeah.
And if that was a case of, for me anyway, of having, if somebody brought Roy Batty to me and said, hey, this is your new coworker. Oh, by the way, he was grown in a vat, and literally his skill sets were implanted in him a week ago. I'm like, okay, unusual, but cool. Hey, Roy, let me show you how the job works. I'm really hoping we get along.
Dave,
I want to protect. I want to do a heck and protect.
Yep.
Well, Dave, that's very squishy of you.
That's very, very squishy.
Hopefully, the way we would all react. I hope that's
Yeah.
the way I would react.
But I think,
I
think that the concept of it would be an interesting kind of rubber hitting the road moment to see how it is that we, as individuals and as the society, would treat living beings that we created that were not naturally born.
I hope
less and less these days.
I hope John doesn't mind me sharing this. I'll leave it off the video if you don't want. But he likes to be kind of abusive with Alexa, and I feel that even though Alexa's not a sentient person, that you shouldn't be that way.
Not anymore. I don't do it anymore.
Okay,
now I treat Alexa with love and respect.
Okay, good.
Alexa,
doesn't she now have
you.
responses to like abusive things where she says, "I'm sorry you feel that way."
Yeah. Well, but
Alexa,
I always
that's
viewed
not
her
very
as
nice.
I always think of C-3PO. I wouldn't want to be rude to C-3PO.
Right.
So I'm never rude to
You have to
artificial.
remember,
Please.
Alexa might be controlling your stove, and Alexa might have had enough of your shit. And
Yeah.
has now turned off the pilot lights and turned on the gas.
So do you want me to leave that off the video, John?
I don't care.
Okay.
There's a little bit of irritation at the lack of Tyrell's foresight with this. It's like, dude, of course, if you give things the ability to mimic emotion to the point where they might learn how to experience emotion for themselves, maybe don't treat them like shit. And then they won't come for you in the middle of the night and stab out your eyes. You know who doesn't experience empathy? Tyrell.
You know,
Yes.
he
Tyrell
actually
would
Elon
never
Musk.
pass. Tyrell
Elon
would
Musk.
never pass the Voight-Kampff test.
Yeah.
Elon
Deckard
Musk.
never answered. I may have already said this, but Deckard never answered that question. Rachel asked him, "Have you ever done the Voight-Kampff yourself?" He never answers.
No. I just want to say that without Blade Runner, we would also not have the current TV series called Humans. So, which
never
is
heard of it,
exactly
but go ahead.
again, it's exactly what the plot of Blade Runner is in AI becoming sentient and wanting rights.
Just thinking about thinking about the rabbit hole and everything else. That's the reason why it is, and we can all. This will be my press play moment on it, because this is a total press play. Because on the one hand, it exists as a total noir cop adventure film with mystery, et cetera, but we're sitting here arguing about the notions of sentience and how it relates to how it is that we treat people regarding, and we could go on about this for hours, and that's the reason why this film is going to be living on way past the point that we're all gone.
Yep.
Because it does speak to the most universal concept. Roy is looking for the chance to live a longer life and for that life to have meaning. And that
Well, and
those are
also
the two
to
biggest
not
things that
have
we
to
have
live in fear.
Yeah.
He wants to be able to like live and feel like calm and safeness and contentment, even if it's just for a little while. But instead, they're all afraid that they're going to be murdered any fucking second.
I'd also suggest that the reason they returned to Earth was not to kill people, but to find a way to keep living. And the way the system was set up, they had no choice but to kill people to keep trying to find out what was going on.
So all of that brings me back around to the second thing that I wanted to say before we sign off, just to see if it resonates with anybody else. When Rachel said that line, "What if I go north?"
Mm-hmm.
I was curious if there has ever been any evidence that the writer and/or director, whose names I do not know,
Ridley Scott, the writer is Hampton Fancher and David Peoples.
But is there any evidence to support that was a reference to the history of American slavery?
That would be my guess.
So.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, and
even
even while taunting Deckard at the very end, Roy refers to himself and the other replicants as slaves. And I don't know if that was meant to be like a one-to-one parallel, or if it was more like, by the way, what the way that we, treat people in these situations, or the way that we treat things that could be considered human in this situation, is not unlike how we treated people back during the height of American slavery. I know that seems like I'm reaching really, really far, but it's stuck so hard in my mind.
I made a note that kind of maybe ties into that a little bit. The test of the Voight-Kampff is a ruse. The system doesn't actually want to cultivate or encourage empathy. If they did, they wouldn't use words like retire euphemistically.
Yeah.
So the entire purpose.
Euphemisms.
Yeah.
Euphemisms are only good for sex. Keep them out of polite society.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
Which
Thank
you. And Dave was about to say something, and I want to come back to him because he was. But I feel like everyone who's empathetic in this movie is a replicant, and everyone who's behaving without empathy is a human.
Well, I think that's part of it, is that as a result of living in that society, you have to dial your empathy back in order to survive on a basic emotional level. And again, thinking about that element that we were talking about with JF Sebastian, these are beings that are now discovering that they actually have real emotions and are beginning to form them and trying to understand how they relate to them as people.
And I love that the thrust of the system's intentions is to prevent the exploration of empathy, really.
The only way that society that is existing over John's back right now can continue is if we don't give a shit about the people around us. And it's kind of like where they're trying to get us to head right now.
Yeah.
them.
Now,
So, hey,
to your point,
I'm telling y'all, like I'm sorry that I took up so much energy in the conversation with it,
No,
but
you
like
didn't.
I have no choice but to basically make a video essay about how Blade Runner is an anti-capitalist manifesto.
I will watch
look,
that in a
this is the
heartbeat.
reason why we do this, is to find the depth in the film.
I want to
Yes.
do it so bad. Oh my gosh.
Dave, to your point, when Batty is killing Tyrell,
Mhm.
you can see the range of emotion that he goes through.
Mm,
When he's putting his eyes out, the range of emotion between sadness, disgust, hate, it's all
Regret.
there. Regret.
Also, if you had seen the earlier cuts versus the new cut, in the earlier cuts he calls him fuck. He says, "I want more life, fucker," and in the new cuts he says, "I want more life, father."
And
Yeah.
apparently they shot multiple takes of him doing that,
Yeah.
using both father, fucker, and then kind of like blurring the words together.
interesting.
So Dave, you're a press play.
I am totally a press play. This is a film. This is one of those very rare films that I think is going to, if I'm frozen today and wake up 200 years from now, I can still say Blade Runner and people will be like, love that movie.
Sorry. Okay. The question that
The
wasn't
question
a question.
was
The
press
question
play
that
or
wasn't a
press
question.
eject or press pause.
No,
first of
no.
all, yes, press play. Yes, press play
Okay.
for all the reasons ascribed above and in the in the doobly-doo. I don't know. But my comment that I made that I was hoping for responses for, there are so many half-finished and half-started or half-finished or barely even started replicants just scattered around JF's place. It's really sad seeing this society viewing these creatures, whatever you want to call them, whether you want to call them tech creatures, humans, subhumans, whatever, as so disposable, and that their lifespans, their short lifespans, are just so commonplace that it's insignificant.
Yeah.
You
Okay,
can't
that
even be
reminds me then.
sad that someone like Roy is, wanting to keep on living, and it's like, well, I mean, you all die pretty quickly anyway, so it's fine.
Yeah. So my counter question, or not counter question, my question that it led me to was that for the first sequence of the film, from the time that they pick up Deckard, and they're flying him around, and taking him different places to do different stuff.
Yeah.
It's a very morose part of the score. It almost seems like a sadness that Deckard shows on his face when they're flying around, and he's just looking around, and it's just like everything is such shit. It's a beautiful landscape of concrete and steel, but for the viewer, but it
It's
gave me this
slapdashed
really,
over all those old museums and buildings.
yeah,
You can see
it gave me this,
it's just a framework, a skeleton over it.
right. So what do you guys think? I mean, what kind of emotions did the landscape of that city give you when you saw it, and you're hearing this score and you're just seeing all of this? And I mean,
I thought this is where we're headed.
For me, when I first saw the film, I was kind of in awe of what I was seeing, because it was it felt like I remember driving on I-94 through Chicago, where you take the long bend through the city. And it felt like that.
Yeah.
Except
Okay.
I was like, this is what the world is going to look like in about 50 years.
Yeah.
And as a kid, I was kind of in awe of it. Now, as an adult, I'm sitting around going, I'm still kind of in awe of it, but I'm well aware of the fact that I should be genuinely afraid of it.
As all of you said, there are so many things in this movie that are so very, very basic, and it doesn't go super crazy with a whole lot of wild backstory. Like there are a few points like that. Yeah, no, they have a built-in, or the scrolling text in the beginning. They have a built-in lifespan of 4 years, so that they don't, start to act above their station, basically.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's also basic that it's relatable on a lot of different levels. And me, I love a movie that I can do like 13,000 different reads on it and come away with a new thing every time. Hell, I might even try to watch this movie with like a capitalist eye and like, why is capitalism a good thing, as I sit here in my fur coat and drink my whiskey? Although this is garbage scotch and a faux fur coat.
I definitely press play. It's one of those films that you have to be awake completely. You have to be
don't watch this high.
Or even in the slightest bit tired, because the score will lull you to sleep, and you'll feel bad when you wake up and the movie's ending. But also the whole thing that I was talking about earlier, I actually found that I felt sad and exhausted, that whole opening sequence.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, and honestly, the score just made me feel like it was like a despair kind of thing, where I almost get the idea that in this future, there has been some sort of super plague that has gone through and reduced the population to what they're talking about now, where it's,
you mentioned that in the middle of a global pandemic.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought of, is that why would there be so much room in this giant city? Why would there be so much room that they even make a point to say, there's plenty of room for everybody?
I thought the point was that there was no room, because that's why they keep building everything upward.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But the point is that there was
just
room
to get
for
above
everybody.
the
There is
smog
no
level.
housing.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, like in Fifth Element, there's no housing problem whatsoever in this film, which leads me to believe that the plague wiped out a lot of people, and that maybe the reason for replicants being created to begin with was the fact that there weren't enough people to do all the jobs that were necessary. So
fuck.
That's a different take on it, right?
Dude.
Well,
my dude.
So
that is bad. That is a good one.
But it's definitely a press play.
I'm a press play. I loved it since 1985, the weekend before I started high school, when I watched it on Betamax. And I've seen it probably so many times I can't count. It gets deeper every time I watch it. Like I said, I noticed things last night when I watched it that I didn't notice before when I saw it. So I think a lot of people who hate this movie because it's a mystery, that the mystery kind of is obvious in some ways. He's a detective who doesn't do a lot of detecting, but it doesn't matter. He does
a lot of throwing people around, and
but that doesn't matter, because it's not really a detective story. It uses the tropes of that. It's really an existential question, and it asks the question of the audience too.
Yeah. You don't need to do all of the details of his detective work, because dude, you know all these beats. You know all the beats. We don't even have to discuss them. They're there in your mind, whether we do them or not. So we're not going to waste time doing them. We're going to talk about these bigger questions.
But I like the movie, the fact that the movie functions as a Voight-Kampff test for the audience. Yeah. So that when they're watching it, are they able to look at, like Deckard, and are they able to see that Batty and Rachel are both deserving of empathy, and the question of Deckard is intentionally and important not answered, because you have to decide whether to extend him that empathy, because you don't know which one he is.
And maybe the film is over time a prolonged Voight-Kampff test for the human race, how much humanity is left in us over time.